full horror story. The house on Ashbourne Road. It was supposed to be a new beginning. Daniel Gray drove through the misty countryside, his old pickup rattling along the empty road. The town of Ashbourne wasn't on most maps anymore. A forgotten dot whispered about in local legends. But he didn't care. He needed to escape the city, his past, and the memories that clawed at him. The house he had bought online sat on the outskirts of town, its silhouette dark and imposing against the gray sky. 2 stories of rotting wood, windows clouded with dust, and a porch sagging as if it carried the weight of every soul that had lived there. The locals warned him, though not directly. "Don't stay there too long," the gas station clerk murmured, sliding him his change without looking him in the eye. Daniel laughed, shaking his head. Cheap houses, he reminded himself, always came with rumors. The first night was eerily quiet. The air inside was cold and stale, the kind of cold that doesn't belong to the weather, but seeps from the walls themselves. He unpacked his few belongings, telling himself the creaks and groans of the old house were nothing. But when he woke at 3:14 a.m., he knew something was wrong. Footsteps paced above him, slow and deliberate, though he was alone. A faint smell of smoke hung in the air. He convinced himself it was imagination, until he noticed the shadows in the corners of the room, stretching, twisting as if alive. Days passed, each night worse than the last. At exactly 3:14 a.m., the sounds returned, whispers behind closed doors, taps along the walls, furniture scraping across the floor. Daniel tried ignoring it, told himself he was losing sleep, losing control, but the house was patient. It waited. One afternoon, exploring the basement, he discovered a small wooden box hidden under a pile of debris. Intricately carved symbols covered its surface, pulsing faintly under his touch. Inside, brittle scraps of paper were scrawled with frantic handwriting. "It comes when the house sleeps. It waits for the sound of breath. Do not look at the mirror after midnight." Daniel laughed nervously, shaking his head. Superstition, he told himself. Yet that night, brushing his teeth, he caught movement in the mirror. A shadow shifted behind him, tall, thin, impossibly dark. When he turned, the bathroom was empty. Sleep became impossible. Shadows seemed to linger even in daylight, clinging to corners and doorways. The whispers grew clearer, calling his name. Objects moved subtly when he wasn't looking, leaving behind a trail of unease. The box in the basement vibrated with warmth, as if something beneath the wood was alive. One night, drawn by a force he couldn't resist, Daniel descended into the basement. The walls seemed to pulse, and the shadows twisted into grotesque shapes. The box opened on its own, revealing a mirror inside. He looked into it, and the reflection was not his own. A figure stood behind him, long limbs bending at impossible angles, a face without eyes, and a mouth that stretched wider than it should. It whispered, its voice a chorus of every person who had ever lived in the house. "You cannot leave. You belong to Ashbourne now." He tried to scream, but no sound came. The room seemed to shrink around him, darkness pressing into his chest, suffocating him. In the mirror, the figure reached through, its hand cold and solid, pulling him into the glass. Daniel disappeared that night. The townsfolk say the house waits for its next owner, patient, hungry. They whisper about the shadow in the mirror, about the whispers in the walls, about the eyes that watch from the corners. And if you ever find yourself driving through Ashbourne Road at night, remember, the house doesn't just sit quietly, it listens, it watches, and it waits.